If I could have your attention, please. We're going to go ahead and get started with our committee meeting. As we always do, I'm going to begin with prayer and ask Representative Deloach today if he would lead us in the opening prayer.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we invoke your presence in this place today. We acknowledge that we're standing in the need of prayer. May everything we say and do here today reflect our love for you. In your holy name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Representative. All right, we appreciate y'all being here today. When we last met on Thursday, I told you that you would be getting a updated version of the bill we're working off of on Friday. That went out to you Friday evening, and it reflects the LC number that you have in front of you now for a substitute to Senate Bill 202. And I want you to look in front of you, and this should be the LC number, LC 280-334S, 280-334S. What I want to do first of all is go through again with you the changes that we referenced earlier. First of all, as we spoke about Thursday, if you look on page 57 of the bill, line 1448, that is where we made possible the 2 Sundays during early voting is optional for the counties if they so choose. Then, if you will flip over to page 44. Page 44, Mr. Chairman. The first one is on 57. I'll repeat that again. On page 57, line 1448, that language makes the change for the 2 Sundays during early voting to be optional for the local governments. Then, if you will look on page 44, lines beginning with the lines 1118 through 1134, that is the House language on drop boxes and the changes that we made to say if there is an emergency declaration, those can be moved outside of the early voting precinct. Now, if you look on page 3 of the bill, turn back to page 3. On line 65, you will see the naming of the legislation right there. Page 3, line 65. If you turn over to page 11, turn over to page 11, line 275, you will see a sentence reads, now at no time shall the state election board suspend more than 4 county or municipal superintendents. That used to be 8. That number is changed to 4, as you see there on line 275, and that relates to how many boards of elections could be under the review investigation process by the State Board of Elections for problems. So we went from 8 at a time down to 4. If you will look on page 12, one page over, line 286, line 286 now reads any governing authority. It used to read any county commissioner. So in order to begin the investigation process of a board of elections, you went from having 1 county commissioner to be able to request it to any county governing authority, which of course would mean a majority. Now, if you will flip back to page 57. Page 57, we were just there a second ago regarding the clarification of the language on making sure that the Sundays voting days were optional during early voting. You will see on lines 1449, right there in the middle of the page, 1449 through 1450, that says an addition determined by the registrar or absentee ballot clerk, but no longer than 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That gives for your 2 Sunday optional days the ability for your locals to choose the time they will be open. Now, those are the changes that were made, and I would be happy to answer any questions about any of those or repeat that if you would like me to. But that's the draft you have in front of you. All right. I've been asked to remind all members of the audience that in the house, we do ask, and in the office building, that you wear a mask if you're here. So if you're here without a mask, we would ask you to go and obtain one and come back. If you are, of course, speaking or addressing the microphone, then we don't mind you taking it off. Otherwise, we'd ask you to do that, please. All right. So those are the changes to 0334S. I will be happy to go over any of those again if anybody has any questions. Okay, now we are in the posture of committee action on LC 280334S SB 202. Is there a motion? Do pass. I know you don't. Buddy Deloach moves do pass. Is there a second? There's a second. Chairman Powell. Now is the time for discussion. All right. Representative Smyrie.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I on page 57,
Yes, sir.
I need to get some clarification. As you know, since the committee started this process, the Committee on Election Integrity, one of the main items has been early voting.
Yes, sir.
And to me, it's a major issue as with a lot of these items, but the one that concerns me a lot, because if you look at the number of people that are voting and the number of people that are involved in our process, one of the major items has been the early voting and the matter of whether or not the county would have the option or whether the state would make it mandatory. So I wanted to ask you, as it relates to the new committee substitute
Yes, sir.
that we have, the last one I read was that the committee, the changes of the date, and I don't know if it was in section 28 in the last version.
Yes, sir.
And the last version, my notes tell me that the dates and the times for early voting, and I, first of all, I thought about the fact of, having uniformity and not only in the various counties, but throughout the state. But it was Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, other than observed state holidays. And the second and third Saturday, both of those are still mandatory. But now the clerk or the people, the supervision or supervisors in that county can decide on the second or third Sunday or both if they so choose.
Yes, sir. That's correct. So
And now,
both Saturdays and both Sundays are possible.
but now is there an option now under the lines that on page 57 dealing with early voting?
Yes, sir.
Is there any change there in
No, sir.
regards to respect to that?
So what you have there with that language is your 2 Saturdays, because we only have 2 weekends in early voting,
Right.
the first one and the second one. Both these Saturdays are mandatory and your 2 Sundays are possible optional if locals want it. And they can have both Sundays.
And it would have to be done in the respective county?
Yes, sir. It'd be up to the locals. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the hours will be up to the locals too. If you want to go 7 to 7 on Sunday, you can. If you want to wait till after services and start at 1, you can do that too. It's up to you.
So the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. would be something that would be
Only maximum, but you could set your own hours if you want to.
as it relates to the
Sunday, yes, sir.
Sunday. What is that? Is that applicable to the 9 to 5 days? I mean, the 9 to 5
So,
time?
so yes, sir. Let me go through that. So during your 3 weeks of early voting, during your weekdays, you have to be at least 9 to 5, but you can be up to 7 to 7. And that's the same on your 2 mandatory Saturdays too.
Who
so-
determines that, Mr. Chairman?
It's right in front of you.
Okay.
We will if we enact
I
this.
got you. I
Yeah,
got you.
but
Okay.
but on your Sundays, that's where it's up to the Sundays. The locals have the option of doing Sundays. They also have the option of setting their own hours on Sunday up to the maximum of 7 to 7.
So during the course of the week,
Yes, sir.
there's uniformity in that respect.
Yes, sir.
But on the weekends,
On Sundays.
Sundays.
Yes, sir.
yeah, I
Not
got you.
Saturdays.
Not Saturday.
Saturday falls in with
Saturday-
Monday through Friday.
Saturday's mandatory.
Yes, sir.
The two Saturdays.
Yes, sir.
But the Sundays is when the option kicks in.
That's correct.
And okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes,
And that was my point that I have been really fighting and pleading for the uniformity throughout the state so that we would not, that we would have some uniformity, not have a sort of a hodgepodge of the election laws, and it wouldn't differ from county to county, because that's one thing I thought about. Our election laws is something that, to me, uniformity kicks in, because it want to make it applicable to all counties and have uniformity throughout our state, and not let it be dependent upon a particular clerk or supervisor, election supervisor in a respective county. But you cleared that up for me.
Yes, sir.
And I just want to make that last comment and in respect to the difference between the committee sub and how I really feel about this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I know we have the item before us. I guess this is for discussion, or do I need to put this in the form of a question to the chair? Can I just?
Go, you can ask the chair.
Well, okay, I didn't know if we were in portion just to make a statement on the bill. But to follow up on section 28, isn't it true, Mr. Chairman? I want to make clear Chairman Smyre's point that in the current law on 21-2-385, the law as it existed now only allowed one day.
Just Saturday from 9 to 4.
Just Saturday from 9 to 4 under current law.
That's right.
In our original bill, we expanded that to that and another optional day. And in this bill, we're going to all 4. And I've gotten a lot of emails suggesting that from day one, we were reducing it, when in fact, in all but 16 counties, we've been increasing it each time. And so I agree with Chairman Smyre here. We strive toward uniformity, but there are people that want to have this Sunday voting. And then there are people that I've gotten notes from this weekend that were smaller counties that did not want to have the burden to have to be open on Sunday. So we're trying to strike that example to let people have access to the vote, but not require smaller counties. If you recall, Chairman Fleming, we had the one individual, I believe, only had 3 folks in their elections office, and they would be working essentially here for 19 days straight if they worked on all those, because they didn't have any time off. So this does give everybody that wants it 4 days, all the days they can on the weekend. And yet it allows our smaller counties that can take care of their voters and give them opportunities without having to be open on all 4 weekends. It gives them a local choice to do that. And I thank the chair for doing that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The light's not coming on for me, so.
I think, speaking to the mic, I believe we're hearing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Um,
got you. Go ahead.
So I have a question as it relates to the counties.
Yes, ma'am.
In this bill, it requires the counties to pay for new security paper. Do we have a sense of what that cost might be?
So the estimates that I've heard would be 50% more.
Okay, so follow-up question, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
ma'am.
So with this omnibus bill as large as it is, Are we going to have a physical note with this?
Fiscal notes are for state expenditures, Representative, not counties.
I'm sorry.
Fiscal notes are for state expenditures, not county expenditures.
I can only assume that the state is not going to help the counties with anything as it relates to their expenses in this
Well,
bill.
we always have, and I suspect we will continue.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lines 539 through 540 seem to allow both the SOS and the SCB to create rules. Which one supersedes if there is a conflict?
And direct me to those lines one more time, Representative.
539 through, I think it probably goes down to 543. 543.
So I think you're probably look at lines 541, 542, and 543. Is that what you're referencing?
Because it has or.
The Secretary of State's office quite often gives guidance through to the local governments, but the state election board has priority.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, any other questions? Representative Burnell, is that you again? Okay, and hold on, let me go to Representative Jones. What number are you, Representative? Madam Speaker, go ahead.
Thank you. I did want to clarify for the committee, the change in the hours. So right now, only one Saturday of early voting is required. The law is silent as to the other 3 days, but one day is required. We are increasing that by 100%. So that now two Saturdays will be required. And one might think that would require a fiscal note, but it doesn't, because that cost is borne. Running elections is borne by counties and cities for municipal elections. But I think, at least from my perspective, to Representative Smyre's point, uniformity within reason. I mean, it's very difficult to have 100% uniformity when we have 4 counties of almost 1 million people each and 4 counties with fewer than 4,000 people who live in those counties. So they have very different circumstances, but we've increased the required weekend voting by 100%. Instead of being silent on the other 2 weekend days, which it was in current law, we are expressly suggesting to counties that they may choose to do Sundays, and they may choose the hours that they want for that. In my research, I noted that 100, before we required the second Saturday, the initial, well, actually, we allowed to, in the initial bill that just mandated the one Saturday, 116 counties had fewer voting hours than this bill would have required. Now that we've expanded it, which I support, allowing all 4 days of weekend and mandating 2, I haven't looked, but the number will be much, much higher. I did want to mention, although I strongly support allowing counties to offer Sunday voting, which was allowed in my county, I do want to point out that only 65,000 Georgians chose to vote on Sunday in the November election out of, I don't know, 2.9 million people who voted early. Now you might say, well, that's because fewer counties, but those were the bigger counties. And of those 16 counties that offered Sunday voting, it was the least popular day in those 16 counties. I would also, and again, I support Sunday voting and I'm very happy with this change, but I would like to correct something else that has been suggested. I hope all churches, I certainly support churches undergoing souls to the polls, encouraging civic engagement and civic action. But in those 16 counties, I will point out that it was really quite balanced among Black voters, white voters, and other races. But among Black voters in those 16 counties only, if you look at the race of the voters that voted early voting on Sunday, they expressly voted at a lower percentage on Sunday than they did the other 6 days of the week. So it would be inaccurate to say that it is a preferred day, at least to date. I don't know what will happen in future elections. It is not the preferred day of the week for African-American voters. In fact, it is a less popular day to African-American voters to vote than it is among white voters. In those 16 counties, that's the only history that we have, in which a lot of people voted at a high level this last election. But I support these changes, and I want to thank the committee, and I hope you will as well.
Representative Burnell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the response about African Americans not voting on Sunday, if you do recall, in November, we had the ballot drop boxes, plus we had no excuse absentee ballot. So that probably is why that a lot of them didn't vote on Sunday, because they had more options. But I'm sure that once we start to continue to reduce the number of days and the fact of who can get an absentee ballot and who cannot, that those numbers will increase on Sunday. I just had to make that comment. But however, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to know what will be our role as legislators? I know there are a lot of things in Section 1 that we're supposed to do. Will we be coming back into session to do those things? Or will, if a county gets in trouble and it's something that we have to decide, they'll wait? So if they get in trouble in, say, say in April, they have to wait till we come back in January, or will it be some kind of special committee appointed?
There is no provisions in the bill that I'm aware of that requires us to be in session for action to be taken regarding a county that's having problems.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted
Yes,
some
ma'am.
clarification.
Yes, ma'am. Any further discussion? The chair sees none. Chairman Smyrie.
But I did want to ask about the funding. There's been a lot of discussion about various county offices and superintendents registration receiving funding, external funding from sources other than governmental entities. And in Section 9, which revises the code section, the state election board will propose to the General Assembly a method of accepting contributions that will be equitable distributed across the state. Tell me, I mean, when you say equitably distributed around the state, just clarify that for me, Mr. Chairman, because I think now
Sure.
that the funding that was brought to fore on this election and the past election was those counties that had a higher volume. And so, I mean, that was a need and that was a cause for it. So I'm just trying to see. So the process will be, once we pass this legislation, then the State Board of Education will propose.
State Board of Elections.
State Board of Election will
Yes,
come back to us and provide a methodology by which the contributions will be distributed. Is that what that means?
Yes, sir. As we do often, we quite often instruct and ask agencies that deal with certain issues to report back to us on certain possible changes to our law. And that is what we've done to the State Board of Elections. We have asked them to study the issue of being a reciprocal, possibly a receiver, possibly for contributions, and how those may be equitably distributed around the state. And equitably, would be much like we do with other state grants and funds. Our QBE formula, for example, the formula is set up to equitably distribute a certain amount of state monies around the state based upon several factors. I would say that would be a fair comparison.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a comment made, and I just wanted to get a little clarification from Representative Burnell. You said restrictions that are in place, and I was just curious what restrictions you were referring to.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was talking about the fact that we will not have ballot drop boxes and that the time for, and that the hours are reduced and the ballot drop box will be inside. So people won't have access to them only if it's an emergency. And I don't know what the emergency is.
I think the pro tem already mentioned the hours issue for early voting. That, you know, again, this legislation doesn't restrict, and in fact, increases hours of early voting across the state. And to the drop boxes, you know, that language is in this legislation, and the public health state of emergency that we were in last election cycle, and then now again, we remain in that public state health of emergency. And I believe that's what the language in the legislation refers to.
Sure.
Okay, yes, thank you for that comment. However, it's just like we didn't have Zoom, and then Zoom came about, and we're not, and people will still continue to use Zoom. So my feeling is that that we should still continue to have the same amount of drop boxes that we had previously, because in my county, based on what this legislation, we will go down from 9 to 1 drop box. And people like the drop boxes. So I don't know why, if somebody likes something, we have to get rid of it. And then we got to have a guard sitting next to it. All that's a form of intimidation. So that's my feeling on this.
Representative Jones.
I would like to point out that 38 counties did not have a single drop box. And that I've looked at, I have the list, I'm happy to share it with you. The vast majority of counties had just one. And there were some counties that will actually, per this legislation, have to increase the number of drop boxes that they have.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I've been on this committee dealing with elections since I was elected. And the one thing I do know is that Fulton County is the whooping boy of elections. All we ever hear about is how bad it is in Fulton County. And so by taking these drop boxes away, that's going to continue to escalate the problems in Fulton County. That's going to escalate lines. You all can say it however you want to. But at the end of the day, changing this is going to make voting worse than what it has been. And the access will be limited. So I don't have to keep arguing back and forth. The results will speak for itself when we have our first election.
Madam Speaker.
Yeah, I just would like to clarify that the State Board of Election passed an emergency ruling primarily at the request of the elections officials, certainly not by the voters who weren't really aware of drop boxes. I mean, they're a very new phenomenon, and they were put in place because of the pandemic and concerns that elections officials had that voters would be coming to the Board of Elections, because that's the only other mechanism that existed prior to the 2020 primary, was to take it either you could either take it to the drop box at the end of your driveway or at the bottom of your apartment complex, the most convenient way to use absentee voting. Or if you preferred a different manner, you could take it to the Board of Elections. I too live in Fulton County and have never visited the Board of Elections, but I do think that this formula in here for non-pandemic times, when we're not concerned about social distancing, for something that's, you know, one would think they had been here for decades, but truthfully, they've only been here since the primary of 2020, that according to this formula, you'd probably have about 9 in Fulton County, something we've never had to date. It's really quite exciting to think that we're putting it in code so that we'll have another secure option. Certainly, I never heard anyone prior to the primary of 2020 suggesting that they couldn't mail their absentee vote or the lines were longer because they didn't have a vote box, because probably they'd never heard of them before. But Fulton would have probably about 9, according to this formula, geographically distributed by population, which would most likely mean 3 in North Fulton, 3 in Atlanta, and 2 in South Fulton. I think that seems adequate to me, and certainly a great improvement in what we've ever had prior to the pandemic.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have the bill in front of us. I have 4 amendments that have been given to the chair. 2 of them are the chairs. They're what I would call technical changes that we're going to pass out to you and I'll explain to you. And 2 of them are slightly substantive. However, we're going to pass them around one by one. So it doesn't become, you'll have it right in front of you. The first one is about to be passed out to you now. It's going to be the first one right there. You will pass out. So I'm going that way. You will pass out some going that way, back. Let everybody get a copy of it. All right. The one you have in front of you is AM 28-1848. It will be the chair's amendment. If you will turn to page 57, line 1447. Now, we were just discussing, Chairman Smyer was the optional Sundays that we're now for the first time giving to in code our local governments. All this does is make it clear that your registrars, as they have been, are the ones that do the choosing for that. That's all it is a clarification. This is something the lawyers read over and said, we want to make it clear that they do have the choice of either or both Sundays. That's all it does. Any questions on that? Is there any objection to AM 28-1848? The chair sees none. It is in. Now we're going to fold that one up, put it away so you don't about to pass out another technical amendment to you. All right, I believe everybody now should have in front of them another amendment the chair will offer, AM 28-1847. AM 28-1847. If you flip just back one page to page 56, right there at the bottom on line 1435. This is another technical amendment. This is also in the same area that we were talking about. It simply strikes on line 1435, the 2 words, the word general that is there twice. It does that simply because it's superfluous. It doesn't need to be there. It has no meaning. And whenever we put something in the code that has no meaning, it can become confusing. So it changes nothing, simply makes it clarifies. And all this is in the early voting period. It will still have your every weekday or every Monday through Saturday, as we discussed, and then your 2 optional Sundays for early voting. Is there any questions regarding that amendment? Chair sees no questions. Is there any objection to AM 28-1847? The chair hears none. It is in. Now fold that one up. All right, the first substantive amendment is Speaker Pro Tem's, and I'm gonna have that passed out to you now. Okay, the one you have in front of you now is Madam Pro Tem's. It is AM 28-1853. That is AM 28-1853. And Madam Speaker, I'm going to recognize you too in a second to explain it, but I'm going to tell you the chair's understanding, and then you can correct me and as you do your explaining if need be. As the members are aware, in the bill in front of you, there are two procedures which can be undertaken in regards to the functioning of counties and the boards of elections. The first procedure is what is referred to as a performance review. Now, that is simply where a state official with Secretary of State's office and then two appointed other election officials around the state come together at the request to do an evaluation of a board of elections, almost like a performance review. Tell us how we're doing, give us some advice on where we are needing improvement, or maybe we don't. In the original bill, that could be requested by a county. We are now allowing it to be requested by legislators. That would be, if you're a smaller county, 1 senator, 1 House member. If you're a larger county, 2 senators and 2 House members. So now that legislative interaction was taken from another part of this, which I will mention to you. There is something on the pages a little bit earlier there, which talks about an intervention process where an actual investigation takes place by the State Board of Elections, and it could be triggered by a couple of different ways. It could be triggered by a county governing authority voting to do that. It also could be triggered by the State Board of Elections doing that. And it was able to be triggered by 2 legislators, House and Senate members doing that. That portion was removed, the legislative involvement in that section of the investigation, which could lead to a temporary suspension of the election superintendent in order to try to help the county get back on track. So as I understand it, Madam Speaker, that is what the amendment does, but I want to turn it over to you and let you continue.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I do support this and worked with a variety of folks to come up with it, took the heart some of the feedback that we received from elections officials, from the public, from the hearings, and the role of the legislature has been greatly diminished in this amendment, in that legislators representing a county or city would really have a very indirect role in along with the state board or the governing authority. Majority of the governing authority could.
And if I may,
Yes.
Madam Speaker,
Yes.
the difference that you're referring to is that succinctly is that
Yeah.
used to be the legislators could start the actual
That's
investigation,
correct.
which could lead to the intervention.
That's right.
Now, all they can do is request a performance review.
Right. Which may
Right.
or may not lead
Right.
to an investigation.
Right.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, in the other version, the prior version, it was 1 county commissioner that could,
Yes, yeah,
And
those are
that
some of
is-
the changes that were in the sub that I spoke about earlier,
okay,
which also goes to this area.
yes,
There was there originally where only 1 county commissioner could ask for this investigative process. We changed that to the governing body, which would be interpreted to mean a resolution by the governing body, or a majority would need to pass it and ask for that start.
which is an appropriate role for the governing authority. In some cases, they actually are responsible for all the appointees for an elections board, sometimes for the chairman. It's really 159 different ways of doing it around the state or more. But I support this amendment. I think it gives a role only for elected officials, whether it's governing authorities, well, also the state elections board,
Right.
which are not all elected, and a lesser role, a more indirect role for the legislature, simply to initiate a request, a performance review, not an investigation.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I'm correct, you're saying that in section 7, you're taking out the legislative power in section 7, but it's still in there for section 2, 4, 5,
No, ma'am.
6, 11, and 50.
No, ma'am.
Yes, it is.
It-
It's
it-
in, it's in
it-
there.
It removes it and places it in a different place, and that's the ability to request a performance review.
Mr. Chairman, correct for section 7, but it is in the rest of the sections of this bill.
And see what section 7 does, that is the meat of the proposal. All the other sections refer back to it or names the people that are involved in it. But actually, the functioning of it is right there in section 7. So when you change that, it affects all those other parts. Any other questions? Representative Deloge.
In the section in the amendment. What's numbered in the amendment line? Start on line 23 and it talks about the number of violations. Does this amendment change that number of violations required for a finding?
Identify the line again.
See if I can go back
In the-
to-
in the-
23 and 24 of the amendment.
Yes. Does that change what's in our?
No, sir. No, sir.
It does not. 3 is what's in our, 3 rather than 2 is what's we got. now.
Council is telling me it does not. It's 3.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Any other questions regarding the Speaker Pro Tem's amendment, proposed amendment? All right, the chair sees, Chairman Smyer.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And to the office, Speaker Pro Tem Jones. Am I correct that the amendment, where it says start on line 43 on the amendment, but it says by striking the state election board may also submit a request to the Secretary of State. Is that applicable to 501 through 503?
Tell me what line of the amendment you're on, Mr. Chairman.
The second page
Yes, sir.
where it says
Line-
line 43 by striking thereof. You follow me? By striking the state election board, but that's pertaining to, am I correct saying that that's pertaining to 501 to
Yes, sir.
503?
You are correct.
Okay,
That's the part it affects.
so
That's
that will
correct.
come out, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because I'm trying to see functionality because
Yes, sir.
in the bill itself, the chair of the state election board would not be the Secretary of State.
That's correct.
That is correct. So we were in essence making a request to the Secretary of State. But I'm good now if you take it, that's coming out.
Yes, sir. It comes out in that
Okay,
version. Yes, sir, right
okay,
there.
all right.
Any other questions regarding the Madam Pro Tem amendment? The chair hears no further discussion. Is there an objection to AM 28-1853? The chair hears none. It is in. All right. Now, the last substantive amendment is Chairman Shaw Blackman. And if we will, do you have the copies over there, Mr. Chairman? Yeah, you have the copies, or they've already been passed out? All right, all right, I'm gonna give you the number, AM 28-1855. AM 28-1855. Does anyone not have AM 28-1855? Okay, I see, it looks like this, it's got about 1 paragraph on it. Representative Alexander, do you have it? There you go. All right. Anybody not have AM 28-1855? All right. Representative Newton, if you will come to the podium, Mike. This is an amendment that Representative Newton had worked on that Representative Shaw Blackman intends to propose, but I was going to allow the representative to explain, and then, of course, the chairman to make any comments he has. Go ahead.
Well, first, on behalf of all the members that are not on this committee, I want to thank you all for the tremendous work you've done. I know the number of hours going over this and getting feedback from your constituents and from other members has been tremendous. I was impressed when the minority leader the other day in a morning order brought his copy of the state constitution of Georgia and used it, which I proceeded to borrow a copy of it. But one section of it in Article 2, voting in elections, says elections by the people shall be by secret ballot conducted in accordance with procedures provided by law. That's essentially what this amendment that I've proposed and discussed with Chairman Blackman does. It just makes it clear that this currently, when you go into a polling place, which up until this past election was the most common way everyone voted, I'm glad this committee has seen fit not to go down the eliminating the no excuse absentee voting. I think that's been, I know, against a lot of pressure from a lot of different areas, but I think the committee has left that option open. As I think Representative Brown or someone mentioned, that people have gotten used to something like that. What this amendment seeks to do is just to make sure that in the same way that a secret ballot is guaranteed when you vote in person, we have monitors there. We have 150-foot barrier from excessive campaigning. We have polling monitors there. You even have barriers on either side of your voting machine to protect even your spouse from seeing how you voted. We are also prevented, if we go there, even if our name's on the ballot, like a lot of ours, you're prevented from taking a picture of that completed ballot because it's a misdemeanor. It's against the law for us to do that. And that, I think, is probably due to the constitutional right that you have to have your ballot be secret, but it's also the constitutional right of everybody else in Georgia to know that I'm keeping my ballot secret. What this does in 1855, the amendment, is just makes the same prohibition that applies in person. It applies to this ever more popular absentee voting. Just like I can't take a picture of a vote that's done in person, you can't take a picture of a vote that's completed on an absentee ballot. Now, other places in the bill obviously allow for a caregiver, a family member, the ones that are authorized to see your ballot. That's fine. But as far as taking a photograph, it just mirrors the language that makes it a misdemeanor if I take a picture of my ballot in person, and this applies to the same standard to an absentee vote.
What number is Shaw? Chairman Blackman, do you have any comments or follow up?
I don't. Chairman Newton asked me to sponsor this amendment, and I found it to be appropriate, so I thought I'd
Okay.
offer it up. Thank
Any
you.
questions regarding Amendment AM 28-1855? Any questions? The chair, thank you, Representative. The chair sees none. Okay, in front of you. Oh, Chairman Spire.
I thought it was already prohibited of using electronic equipment
In the-
a polling place.
That's a good question, and that's the same one I asked Reverend Smyre when Dr. Newton asked me about this. I said, I believe you already can't take a picture of your ballot, and it's clear that you cannot
Right.
in the voting booth, but it's not clear with absentee balloting.
This will
And
make
that's
it clear.
what this
This will
does.
make it clear.
It puts them on both the same footing. No matter how you vote your ballot, you're not supposed to take a picture of it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So now you're making it a misdemeanor. You're adding that piece in there.
I think it mirrors the language. If you were to take a picture, or any of us were to take a picture of our ballot in person, it's the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the chair sees no further question. Chairman Martin.
And to be clear, this is of the ballot, the official ballot. There are many times people will mock up a ballot and try to help,
Sure.
on a campaign type issue. This is the official ballot one cannot take a picture of. Because if there's mock up, you see that a lot of times when people are campaigning, they'll go candidate A, candidate B, and they'll put a check in that, and it'll be on a mail plate. That's not a vote. That's you're talking about the actual ballot that would be scanned or counted, tabulated.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification.
Chairman Smyre.
Mr. Chairman, in your original version of section 25, that was already a stipulation that what is being defined here is already a misdemeanor. Would you clarify that in section 24 on on the code section 21 to
Sure.
379.25.
The operative line is line 12 in the amendment. That is the addition. It is a duplication of the law except for line 12. Photograph or record a voted ballot. And that covers the absentee ballot portion. Current law already covers the in-person voting.
Now, is that applicable to in-person voting or ballot period?
It's always been applicable to in-person
That's
voting, your
right.
ballot, however, whatever kind of ballot you have. But now it would be applicable to an absentee ballot as well. Same protection given to in-person is given to absentee,
So it'll be applied across the board?
across the board,
Okay.
even. Yes, sir. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question. What about the envelope?
Doesn't affect the envelope, just the ballot itself.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, the chair sees no further questions. In front of you is Chairman Blackman's AM 28-1855. Is there objection? The chair sees none, it is in. That is all the amendments that the chair has been given. There is a motion due pass by committee substitute. Is there any further discussion? All 4 amendments have been adopted. There is no further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is passed to rules. Thank you. We stand adjourned.